Welcome, everybody, to the American Space Museum. I'm Marquette, and we're so glad you're with us to stay curious today with astronaut Tom Jones, Dr. Tom Jones. How you doing, sir?
Good to see you, Mark.
We're glad to have you here. It's our privilege to have this astronaut in not only the American Space Museum, but we enjoy his talk out at the Astronaut Encounter at Kennedy Space Center. Tom, how are you?
Doing very well. It's always great to come to the Space Coast and meet old friends and see old rockets and some new rockets too.
You just told me you've been doing this Astronaut Encounter 20 years. Is that right?
Yeah, that's about right. I left NASA in 2001 and I heard about the fact that there was this opportunity to come and talk to the public about the space program, and I thought that would be right up my alley. And I'm a space historian from back when I was a kid, and so it's a fun topic to talk about.
Well, it's it's a fun topic to talk about, and you do such a great job out there. I want to say hi to Marty, my co-producer, Grumman and employee, and he processed those engines for you and your shuttles. Hey, Marty, how are you?
I'm doing great, Mark. How are you?
Well, good. Excited to have Mr. Tom Jones here.
Hello, Tom.
Pardon me?
I said hello, Tom.
Glad to be with you, Marty.
We've seen quite a few talks out here the last few years we've gone out there, and Tom's is one of the more impressive ones. It's just so succinct, and you really engage the audience, and I think you do a great job out there.
NASA gave me a lot of material to talk about. So
Yeah,
it's
well,
a
we have
privilege.
Nick Thomas on our show, and he puts those together, and it's a big team effort out there. But we have some favorites once in a while, and I like your approach to his talk out there. We're going to share some of his images that I've seen him share out there and love your story. But we're also going to talk about his 5 books that you have out, a new book. Why don't you plug your new book there and with your hands there?
Very excited because at the end of October, we're going to have this new book out, my Space Shuttle Stories book, and it's published by Smithsonian Books. And Space Shuttle Stories is an oral history of the shuttle, incorporating one astronaut's tale from every one of the Space Shuttle's 135 missions. So during the COVID stand down, if you will, I got in front of my Zoom rig and started talking to all my Space Shuttle colleagues and collected one of those stories from every one of the missions, starting with STS-1 all the way through 135. And so it was a fun activity for me to talk to all of my colleagues and get their stories in a book like this, because we're sadly going to lose some people to time gradually, and I wanted to grab those memories of these shuttle flights in a way that the technical books about the shuttle haven't been able to approach. And so this is complementary to some great books by Dennis Jenkins and others that tell the story of the space shuttle's 30-year career.
We'll have him open up a few pages there as we talk about this in the career of Tom Jones there. As you see, he's got 4 fabulous missions, 53 days in space, 3 spacewalks. And you started this all out, we're going to see here in a minute, as a B-52 pilot and commander back in the day there. So, but we have to ask you, we wondered if you had some ambitions to be a singer at some point in your life there, Tom.
Bushwhacked.
Bushwhacked.
Yes. So when I was growing up in the 60s, the height of the space race, Tom Jones came onto the scene, and I remember how famous he was when he made the big initial splash. It's amazing that he's still productively performing today. And the thing I like about Tom Jones, and of course I hear his name from everybody I get to go and meet in public places. Can you sing? And my standard answer is, only in the shower. But Tom Jones has a space connection.
Oh, he does?
Yeah, he was in the movie Mars Attacks.
Oh, he was.
And
okay.
he was one of the heroes of the movie that saves us from the alien invasion. So
I forgot
check
about
out
that.
Mars Attacks.
Jack Nicholson.
Yeah, that's right.
A crazy movie there. He's for those of you under 40, Tom Jones singer on the Ed Sullivan Show there was from Wales, yeah. Wales. And
so it's my great-grandfather.
And he was just as handsome as you are,
Thank you.
in there. Oh, your great-grandfather is from Wales?
Yes, that's where the Jones comes from.
Okay.
He was an immigrant around 1900. And so here I am.
Well, you went from wanting to be a singer to wanting to be a bad boy here, as we see in a STS-98 poster that we have proudly on the walls here.
Yeah, it's an honor to have you guys display it here. And that was our safety assurance poster to remind all the workers at all the space centers working on the shuttle program that they should be mindful of the fact that there's a crew on board the mission, and we would appreciate their efforts at making the mission and the vehicle as safe as possible. So, and there have been a lot of manned spaceflight awareness posters like that, but we thought we would take it up a notch. And I think Marcia Ivins had the idea for doing the West Side Story look for the.
Yeah, so you still got that
poster.
tattoo on your arm here?
No, I think they were temporary.
Temporary on there. Well, we love pointing that out here in our gallery, our Space Workers gallery, because the mindset, not being a NASA person at all and just getting involved in it 5 years, the mindset of safety, gosh, it goes right down the chain from the janitor to to whatever's going on in your cabin of the spaceship.
Well, we were very gratified that safety poster went viral, if you will, and it was the most popular one up to that point, and I think it might still hold the record today for the numbers of copies requested from contractors and the NASA centers around the country.
You signed a few of them, I'll say.
We sure did.
And there we are, right beside our the terrorism poster that's from 1991, where you're going to the bathroom and you look on the right and you see his poster. It's got your bullseye where I work. That's that one in the middle there. So good to share that with you. But one of the things I've loved, I've heard you talk many times. We were one of the first people I saw talk 5 years ago out there. And I love the story about how you took Grandma to space.
You bet.
Tell us that story.
So my grandmother, Mary Jones, lived right up the street from me. And by the time I was 5 years old, I was a curious reader. And she happened to pick up at the Five and Dime store this copy of Spaceflight, The Coming Exploration of the Universe. It's a golden book of knowledge. And it was about 50 pages long. And this one was about spaceflight. And of course, when I was 5, nobody had gone into space yet, even to take a picture. So inside there were just these paintings, like the Chesley Bonestell kinds of paintings, the artwork that showed what exploring space and the solar system might be like. And boy, that captivated me as a 5-year-old. And so what tickles me is that I still have it today. And because it directed me towards space science and astronomy and the space program, I kept that book as a talisman of my quest to become an astronaut one day. So when I did get to fly, I brought that book with me on Columbia on STS-80. And that's what you saw in that picture right there, is me looking out the window over my shoulder of the Earth from Columbia's flight deck. And I've got that book with me. So it's back on my shelf at home. And it's amazing. The cover price was only 50 cents. And my grandmother waited till the price was reduced. And like I think, she loved me. She wanted to invest in my future. She said, I'll drop a quarter on that kid.
There you go.
That was
50 cents in the day was like $5 in today's money, but
yeah,
so precious.
Thrifty minded.
Yes. I know that I either saw it in a library or had it myself, because I'll never forget, like you point out here at your talk, the EVA astronaut with the
claws on the toes.
Yes. The claws on the toes and the hands.
That really captivated me. And, there's the predictions of an orbiting space station and a space taxi. So in some ways, I got to go to both of those in reality, and certainly wore an EVA suit on my spacewalks at the station. So pretty neat to come full circle to the vision pushed out by that book.
It is. I like how you share that with the public there. Well, let's start your astronaut journey. Started with you need to be a pilot.
Right. So, I had this book and I got interested in the height of the space race, the news coming over about Mercury and Gemini. I don't remember Mercury, but I do remember the Gemini flights, and we'd have a television in the classroom that would watch the launches and splash down. And where I grew up in Essex on the east side of Baltimore, it was only 1.5 miles from the Martin Marietta plant, where Martin was building the Titan II missiles for the Gemini program. So the rockets were vertically stacked in Middle River, Maryland. And the Gemini astronauts flew in to see the progress on their launch vehicles. Then they'd be broken down after testing and shipped on the Pregnant Guppy, I think, to the Cape. And then they'd fly those 10 piloted Gemini missions. So I saw rockets when I was 10 years old. And I thought, if I want to be an astronaut like the guys who get to ride these Titan IIs, then I'm going to have to be a pilot, a test pilot like Gus and John Young and John Glenn. So I thought aviation was the key to achieving a spaceflight career. Not true anymore. NASA will teach you flying when you get down to Houston. But at the time, almost all the astronauts were professional test pilots. So I went to the Air Force Academy and then learned to be a jet pilot in the Air Force, and flew B-52s for 5 years during the Cold War.
There you are in the cockpit of a B-52 there.
Yeah.
Young, blue eyes, just
Wet,
ready to take on the world
wet
there.
behind the ears. Yes.
Yeah, wet behind the ears there. Um, uh, Tell us a little bit about how you grew up. You said you grew up in Baltimore. You're from a
Right.
small family, big family.
Uh, Three brothers and sisters, and my dad was a school teacher and then a guidance counselor, and my mom was started out as a hospital lab technician, but as the family grew, she just stayed at home as a homemaker. And so I got a lot of encouragement from them about dreaming big. Nobody discouraged me from my dreams of becoming an astronaut because they were seeing it take place on the TV. There's Neil Armstrong setting foot on the moon by the time I was in junior high. So they didn't laugh at me when I said I wanted to do that. Instead, my dad, as a guidance counselor, my dad was able to, tell me the nuts and bolts of how you might get into the Air Force Academy or the Naval Academy. And then beyond that, how you get into an aerospace career. And then I got connected with the Martin folks. I was a Cub Scout when I saw the Titan IIs, but as a high school senior, I got to go to career day at Martin Marietta and learn something about what the engineers really did there. So all of these things were, encouraging that people thought, hey, this kid can really do that. So it was just part of my dream that I would get the right background, and then if I worked hard, perhaps I'd have a chance to really do this career.
Well, you certainly did. Six other siblings, huh?
No, just two brothers and a sister.
Oh, two brothers. You said, okay, all right, yeah. So what do they think? Were you the big brother? Where'd you lay up?
I'm the oldest.
Oldest? So how do they look at you?
They can't believe it.
They can't believe it.
No. So they've all had, good lives on their own. And I think that we all had our own dreams to pursue. And my dad and my mom, were supportive of all of us going forward.
That's good. That's
What's been nice for me is, I can invite my family down to see my launches. And then on other occasions, we can all get together at the Space Center for just some beach time without the stress of a launch. But they all came down to support me when I flew.
Well, it had to be four different occasions here that happened, and we're going to look at those flights right here from your website there. He's got a wonderful website. It's just Tom Jones, right?
AstronautTomJones.com.
And you can book him for a speaker and all kinds of things on there, but very concise of his missions there. Your first two, 59 in April '94, and then by golly, right away you're back up in space on STS-68. We're going to talk a little bit about those missions there, but did you think now you were a hairball in the class of what year?
1990.
1990. So 4 years you're going to space twice. That's pretty lucky.
Yeah, we were lucky as a class because we hit NASA right as the shuttle hit its stride. And so recovering from Challenger, by 1990, they had worked off a lot of the payloads that were backlogged. And moving forward, they wanted to keep flying a lot of science payloads. So we were getting 6 or 7 flights per year. And the astronaut office was about 100 people when we joined the astronaut corps. So if you just do the math, flying 40 people a year out of 100 or 120, you pretty much realize that every 3 or 4 years, you might get the opportunity to go. And in this particular example of my first 2 flights, they were the same payload, Space Radar Lab. And JPL was the American partner coupled with the Italian and German space agencies. And JPL and the other scientists involved in this Earth science mission wanted to fly the Space Radar Lab in 2 seasons of the year to look at how the Earth is changing the biosphere and pollution levels, looking at ocean currents and ice flows. And so all of those Earth science investigations want to be looked at in 2 different contrasting seasons. So they had to fly 6 months apart. And in fact, they moved it even closer to about 4 months apart. And so the astronaut office challenge was, how do we get crew members from one of these missions, take some experience from the first mission to transfer over to the success of the second? And I was just the lucky guy who got to transfer from mission 1 to mission 2. Everybody else had another assignment already, and I was the lucky man to get to fly it twice.
This Space Radar Lab's quite an operation. Mikey Haddad, our payload specialist, is doing a Stay Curious program about that. Reminder that we're recording this program, so you're not able to ask any questions. We have Tom Jones here after hours. He put in a big week out there at Kennedy Space Center. And so we're grateful for you to sit down here with us today on there. But yes, the Space Radar Labs. We'll talk about that here in a second. There, we'll get your other two missions there. STS-80, the longest mission in the shuttle's illustrious 3-decade career, and STS-98, which was in itself quite an astounding mission. There, you really had some. I think seems like you kept pretty busy up there.
Right. Every mission was a new and different challenge. And that's what I really enjoyed about the astronaut job was that each time you flew, you got to learn a new discipline, take on a new professional challenge, fly with, of course, different and creative people. And so every time I flew, I got to do something new. And that's how I was able to convince my wife to let me keep flying, because each time I'd say, this is different, this is new. And so would you let me go on one more? And Liz was nice enough to let me do that at the cost of a lot of stress and anxiety.
Yeah, speak of that about the families then. You've been an astronaut escort and so forth.
Right.
Just, it's...
So much respect for the families who support the crew members today on the space station and back during the shuttle era, because, they get all the stress and anxiety, which the astronauts get, of course, too, but they don't get the payoff. They don't get to go to space and see the beauty of the Earth or enjoy the professional challenge or the achievement of a spacewalk, for example. And yet they continue to say, yes, Tom, you can go again. And that's a real gift, to let your spouse take on that extra challenge. And everybody has their own personal decision point in which you consider the future for your family. And after 4 missions, it was time to let my family choose what to do next. But other families, live it differently. Some fly only once or twice, and then others, like Story Musgrave, my crewmate on STS-80, he went 6 times.
Yeah.
So it's just amazing that we have supportive families that will support that kind of work. And, they realize the value to the country of the work that we were doing. And of course, they love you and they want to see you succeed.
And we've heard that, Marty. We heard these astronauts, some of them just flat out say, my wife wouldn't let me do the 3rd mission anymore. It was enough. And
that's a very honest point of view, because everybody does have a limit, and you have to recognize as a husband and a father when your family has had enough of that, and so you put them through the grinder when you're getting ready to fly in space. And as I said, it's a lot of stress and anxiety. Even today, when my family comes to Florida, my wife will say, it's so nice to come back down here and there's no stress, there's no anxiety. I don't have to worry about the mission.
So tell us about your wife's name. And
her name is Liz.
Liz.
We've been married 42 years.
42 years. Yes. All right.
So when we first moved to Houston, I said, well, we'll go to Houston. I'll join the astronaut corps for maybe 4 or 5 years, get 1 or 2 flights, and then we're done.
Uh-huh.
Turned into 11 years and 4 shuttle flights. And so she's a saint for letting me do that.
And your children?
Oh, I have 2, and they're in their 30s now. So my daughter is the oldest, and she's an aerospace engineer PhD, Annie, and my son Bryce is a State Department employee, and he's stationed over in Central Asia right now in Uzbekistan.
Oh my gosh! Wow. Well, good for him helping our country.
And of course, they saw all of these space adventures too, and I've been very gratified that when they've come back to Florida, as adults, I could take them through the Space Center and show them some of the stuff they didn't understand when they were too young to deal with all of the details of these launches.
We're talking to Tom Jones here, 4-time astronaut, spacewalker 3 times, excellent career here. Let's speak about, he's written 4 beautiful books. We just briefly talked about the shuttle, his new one, Space Shuttle Stories there, and we'll open it up a little bit there at the end of our program here. Tell us about the other books.
Well, I started out after leaving NASA with the project in my mind of, I've got to write all this down, all these experiences down before I forget about them. So while they were still fresh in my memory, I started writing Skywalking, which was my memoir, and telling the story of my 4 shuttle flights and putting you in the spacesuit and putting you in the shuttle cabin for those adventures. So I wanted to make it very personal and exciting, but also give you a sense of what anxiety and risks you face on these flights. So Skywalking is my story, my personal story, but then there's more to tell. And I wanted to write a book about the common questions and answers I get here at Kennedy Space Center and other places that I speak. And so Ask the Astronaut was a result of that, with 343 questions and answers about every aspect of spaceflight, including, a young person's future in space. But I love space history and I love aviation history, having been an Air Force pilot. So my heroes, as I went through my Air Force Academy years and flew in the Air Force, were World War II aviators. And in particular, I learned about the P-47 Thunderbolt pilots of the European theater of World War II. And the Thunderbolt was a very rugged and successful fighter bomber that was used to blast a way forward for Eisenhower's GIs on the ground. So I wrote this book called Hellhawks with my co-author, the late Bob Dorr. We interviewed 80 combat vets for that story and captured their stories, and now a lot of them, of course, are gone. But we told the story of how these guys flew over D-Day and fought in the Battle of the Bulge at age 20 and 19 or 21. And so these were guys who were just tremendously courageous, and I wanted to get those veteran stories down before we lost too many of them. And because I'm a trained planetary scientist from the University of Arizona, I wanted to write about the engaging story of the solar system. So I teamed up with one of my Space Radar Lab science team members, Ellen Stofan. She's another PhD scientist who was one of our JPL scientists on SRL. And so she and I wrote a book called Planetology about the forces that shape the worlds in the solar system and how we can compare and contrast all of our planetary neighbors to our home planet, the Earth. So Ellen went on to become the director of the Air and Space Museum in Washington, D.C., and now she's in the upper ranks of the Smithsonian Institution.
That's excellent. We're going to talk about planetology, a little curveball I'm going to throw in there. We're going to talk about your astronaut career, but I told you earlier that I wanted to kind of being an amateur astronomer and
like
look,
me.
Yeah, like you, look at the, let's just look at what's up there a little bit from an astronaut's perspective there. So all these books are available on Amazon, and hope you're pre-ordering the Space Shuttle Stories. You can do that now. You got a kind of a writing theme. You love interviewing people, and you must have a really good tape recorder or whatever on there. That's you explained a little bit about the writing process, so you find it very rewarding and satisfying, obviously.
Well, it's a challenge, and I like a challenge, but it's tough work because you sign a deal with a publisher and you're going to deliver them a product, and it's a batch of text that has to be turned in by a certain date. And so now there's time pressure from square one. And now you've got to meet the schedule that the publisher has laid out. And so this Space Shuttle Stories is no different, where I had to deliver all of my astronaut interviews, over 130 of them, condensed down to something that could be printed on a page, and then have it edited and readable by the time that my deadline rolled around. So I worked on it for about 3 years. And then finally in 2022, push came to shove, and I had to start putting these things out on paper and sending them to my editor. And so I took a concentrated 7 months or so to condense all those interviews and get them all down to where they were presentable. And then I could go to work with the Smithsonian editor and get it ship shape for publication.
So I shared with you that I've been a writer most of my life. Where's your writing? Where do you think and write?
I have a home office.
Oh, just a regular home office. You don't go up in the attic and look out a lonely window and write stuff and leave me alone. And
like this great space museum that you folks have here. I have some photos of my missions on the walls, and I have my bookshelf full of space history books there. And so I have a nice, comfortable atmosphere to sit in while I type away.
Do you have a do not disturb on the sign? Because I get so intense, I don't want to be disturbed sometimes.
Yeah, I'm lucky that my wife Liz works in her office one level down.
Oh, okay.
And so we don't bump into each other while we're working too much. And in fact, we're far enough apart that we have to call each other on the phone to talk. So shouting doesn't work.
Well, that's a big house. Wow, of course. But that's, I'm just probing the writer's mind out there, a few of you out there, but everybody that reads your work knows that you really command the English language very well.
Thanks.
And when you hear you talk about describing a sunset like you did yesterday at the Space Center, it's just you're just very beautiful. It's just you got a very poetic is what I want to say, how you convey these things.
Thank you.
Let's get to some of this poetry in motion, celestial motion as it will. orbit into Earth. Let's talk about first. What have we chosen as the green screen here? Marty chose that. Tom.
It looks like Columbia on STS-80 coming in for our touchdown at the Kennedy Space Center, December 7th, 1996. And we had planned a 16-day mission to deploy 2 science satellites and then do a couple of spacewalks to rehearse the space station's construction coming in just a couple of years. So that all was going to take about 16 days for the missions of the satellites and then add the spacewalks in. So, but we had bad weather in Florida. And so we waited an extra day for the weather to clear. That didn't happen. NASA was really intent on getting Columbia back to the Space Center here without having to ferry her across the country. So they waited an extra day for the weather to clear. And so we hung on long enough so that we could come in for good weather at the Cape, and we landed here after almost 18 days. That's what gave us the record. We were able to stay up there that long.
And I think it's nice the matriarch of the fleet owns that.
Yes, right.
You know, kind of bittersweet in a way, but beautiful.
That's right. It was a gorgeous dawn touchdown on December 7th.
Well, let's talk about your couple missions there. I asked you to please talk about the artwork. We've talked to several astronauts, and we know that it's part of the early phase of the crew to put their mission patch together. Sometimes it's a way for the commander to see how the crew works together in there. So would you share a little bit about that with these mission insignias? We see them all the time here if you're a space nut, but I'm always amazed at some of the hidden Easter eggs in some of these.
Well, you're right. The crew gets together and comes up with themes of the mission that we'd like to see in the patch. And then all of us, well, not all of us, but if you're inclined as a crew member, you can sketch out some ideas and toss them around the table in the conference room, and we can all trade ideas and hopefully come up with a concept that's rough, but then you can turn it over to one of NASA's graphic artists or perhaps an outside friend who's an artist, and they can help you develop the actual patch. And so then you have to have it approved by the upper echelons at the Johnson Space Center at NASA headquarters before it can become a reality. But it was nice to be in on the ground floor and help set some of our themes. You know, for STS-59 here, we have the orbiter, of course, and then we have the astronaut office emblem in gold, but we use that to represent the radar beams bouncing off the planet's surface and coming back to be recorded aboard Endeavour. And then I think we have 59 represented by 5 stars on the left and 9 stars on the right.
Oh, I love that kind of stuff. Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, I see that. And this radar mission and the payload bay had the instrumentation.
Yeah, the
in there,
radar
so that's
antenna was
why
in
you
the
have
payload bay, and we don't have the doors open here because it's, you know, it's stylistic. But we have the orbiter facing correctly the surface of the Earth. And so when we flew the mission for 11 days, we were mostly upside down with the payload bay facing the Earth's surface. And so that's accurate in terms of our radar science.
Sid Gutierrez is your commander, first Hispanic commander in space. He's also, we're involved with the local space company Via Space that he's involved with there.
Still a rocket man.
He is still a rocket man. And Chilton was the pilot. Linda Godwin flew with you, Cliff Clifford, and Jay Apt there.
Right. Everybody else was a veteran. And we had 24/7 ops with the radar lab. So the 6 of us had to choose early on how we were going to break up into 2 shifts to run this daytime and nighttime shift in Houston. So I was on there with Jay Apt and Rich Clifford, and we were the blue shift working the night shift in Houston. And then Sid and Kevin and Linda, who was the payload commander, they took the day shift, if you will. But of course, when you're in space, there's no night or day. So you just wind up working your 12 hours and follow the flight plan and you'll get through it.
And of course, you're in the kind of confined space there to sleep while the other people are working.
And because of that, we had the room to put the 4 sleep bunks on the right side of the middeck. And so 3 of us could sleep in the bunks while the other 3 were quietly working the radar lab objectives. And one of the pleasures of this flight was we split into 3 and 3, but we overlapped every day for 2 or 3 hours. And so we got to share the views of the Earth in a very unique way. We were only 120 miles up, nautical miles up. And so we got a great view of the ground. And because the orbiter was rolled upside down, pointing at the Earth all the time, we were forced to work in an office that had these windows with this glorious view of the planet. And then the scientists twisted our arms and said, please take thousands of pictures of our science targets for us. So, we were forced to expend reams of film to record this trip around the world for 11 days. So we have the best vacation slides you can imagine.
1994, shooting film. Nikon cameras, I imagine. Some
Hasselblads for the Earth views. And we also had the Aero Linhof mapping camera, which is about a 4 by 5 inch negative. So we had great tools for looking at the Earth, and then you would carry some Nikon bodies to shoot inside the cabin.
And there's a picture. Couldn't find a good picture of you in there, but there's 3 of your crewmates in there.
That's the red shift, and that's Jay, and I'm sorry, not Jay, but Sid on the right, Kevin on the left, Linda upside down there in the middle. That's the day shift.
And that's paperwork, folks, 1990s style, filling up
the flight plan updates coming up every morning from the teleprinter. And then we would cut those into book form and follow the plan.
And then you were lucky just a few months later, you're up in space again with the same equipment. Our friend Mike Baker, Bakes was your commander, Terry Wilcutt, and Mr. Smith we've all seen out there at the Space Center. What did this, I'm going to get to some of the drama of this flight here. Obviously, you'll know what that is, but what did these missions do that we see in today's world, 2023?
Well, radar technology from space was a very new thing in the 1980s when the shuttle first started to fly. A couple of the early STS flights in the STS-2 and the first 4 years of the shuttle really flew 2 radars to examine the Earth from orbit. And that theme of Spaceborn Radar now is a very commonplace tool for observing the Earth. But we were testing out a cutting-edge radar system here in the early 90s that would be the example of how you could monitor almost every aspect of Earth science with a spaceborne radar. So in this case, the Space Radar Lab, this joint Italian, German, US effort, was to pave the way for the routine use of radar that we see today. So all aspects of Earth science being addressed. And in the patch here, you see the orbiter again facing the surface or the map of the Earth there. And you see the 3 partners on the right with their flags. And so it was just a globe-girdling mission that would look at everything between 57 degrees north and 57 degrees south. So we saw everything from the Aleutians down to Tierra del Fuego during the course of a workday. So truly a spectacular perspective for the astronauts.
A workout for the pilot and the commander there to fly the thing, it looks like.
Probably Bakes told you about the over 400 maneuvers that we did on this flight and the previous one to point the radar at the 400 or so science targets that we had. So we were constantly maneuvering the ship at a record-breaking pace.
Well, we're talking about Baker, Wilcutt, Smith, and Jones there. They do all 4 of you guys do great talks out there, and I know you'll enjoy it up there. It's I know Mike Baker said that he really enjoys it every time he comes out there. He does it at Johnson Space Center too.
And you get to talk to the future astronauts and the Mars explorers of the future, and so they're in the audience, and you get a lot of good feedback and energy from the young people in the audience.
Well, on this launch, there was a little bit of drama. Marty wants ask you a question or hear about the pad abort, the 5th pad abort. Take us through that.
Well, we're on the launch pad on August 18th, 1994, and it was just scarcely 4 months since I'd come back from Space Radar Lab 1. So had I flown on August 18th, I would have set the record for the closest turnaround for a shuttle crew member. Didn't happen because as we revved up for liftoff here, we're counting from 6 seconds, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, as the SSMEs came up to full power. And yet the anticipated big jolt from the boosters did not occur. And all at once, all at the same time, we heard the engine noise dying away, the master alarm sounding in the cabin and through our headphones, and then Terry Wilcutt saying, right engine down. And so all of a sudden you're confronted with this brand new situation where, we're not going to space today. You recognize the engines are not firing anymore. And now you think about, how do I get off this high explosive bomb I'm sitting on? And we didn't know whether we were in really serious trouble or whether we had a nice orderly shutdown. And it took about a full minute for the LCC to get us the word that they saw a stable shutdown situation and we wouldn't have to do an emergency egress from the cabin. But we were ready to do that. Quite an adrenaline rush.
Yeah, I'll bet. Question, Marty?
Yeah, Tom, can you explain or describe what your family went through during the abort?
Well, it's all secondhand, of course, but Rich Clifford, who flew with me on SRL-1, was a family escort over there on the rooftop with my
Oh,
family and the other crew families there too. So he made sure once he saw the pad abort that he told Liz, hey, don't worry about the lack of noise. And when you do hear the engine noise roll towards you from that 3 mile distance, it's not an explosion. It's just the startup and then the shutdown. So, and Liz goes, what rumble? She was so focused on what she was seeing that she couldn't even hear the noise coming across there. So yeah, they were trying to process something very unusual, the pad abort, that they had not seen in person before. And so it was good that our escorts were out there with them to say, hey, they had a shutdown, but they're working through the checklists, and they'll go and get them out in about 45 minutes. So uh, a lot of emotions rolling through the minds of my kids and my wife at that point.
You may want to explain the escort.
Sure. Yeah, family escorts, a very important element of preparations for a flight to support the families, because we knew as crew members that we're strapped in and we can't talk or help our families in any material way. So to be our representatives, we always appointed 2 astronauts to be our family escorts. And they stayed with the families in Cocoa Beach for the few days prior to launch. And they were with them on the rooftop of the LCC for the actual countdown and launch. And then they'd go with them back to Houston and then come back and do the same thing for landing. So we knew if something happened to us, that our friends that we'd asked to do this would be there to wrap their arms around our families if we couldn't be there. So it's an outcome of the Challenger accident to make sure that we always had NASA personnel, and even better than that, close friends of our crew's families to be there with them on the roof, just in case of an emergency. And I was honored to do that for some other crews as well.
thank you for elaborating on that there. And so you did get it to launch, and
Yeah, 6 weeks later, we got new SSMEs thanks to Marty and his team, and we got to take off.
all right. Well, we're going to move on to your 4th mission, STS-80. We just talked about the longest mission of the entire program.
Mm-hmm.
And with a veteran crew there, everybody had been in space before. Rominger, it was only his second of 5 flights. Cockrell, your commander, had 3 of 5. It was your 3rd. Tammy Jernigan, her 4th of 5. And Story Musgrave, his final 6th mission. What's this patch all about?
Well, there's our orbiter Columbia that you see graphically depicted, and it's got the round shape of the patch, but you notice that it's only a partial circle, and that's the letter C, showing us Columbia. And we have our 2 science payloads there, the Orpheus Spaz telescope at the top, German-American joint experiment, and then the material science lab called the Wake Shield on its 3rd flight was the disc-shaped flying saucer kind of satellite there at the bottom. And they're 2 linked by the astronaut office emblem with the 3 streaks and the halo around them, the orbit around the 3 supporting legs of the triad there. And the 2 blue stars at the center are the planned 2 spacewalks that Tammy and I were to do to prepare for space station construction, which never occurred. So that's the theme of the patch.
And Tom Usiak was asking about, he said, I know that they planned a spacewalk and it didn't work out. Why didn't it work out?
Yeah, that's the big drama of this mission, was that we had all of our science work going very well. The 2 satellites were out there, and then we covered the wake shield, and I was the arm operator that grappled the wake shield and brought it back aboard. Tammy would do the grapple of the Orpheus Spaz at the end of the mission. But in that interval between wake shield coming back aboard and picking up Orpheus Spaz, we were going to do the 2 spacewalks. On American Thanksgiving Day, we were prepared to go outside for our first spacewalk, and Tammy is the lead spacewalker, and she rotated the hatch handle to open the evacuated airlock to let us outside, and the hatch handle would not go the full rev around. It would only go about 30 degrees. And so it's like an old car window crank, just like that. That's the motion we had to put into it, but it would only turn 30 degrees before it hung up.
Ooh.
So it was a mechanical jam of some sort, we could tell that, but we couldn't clear it, and we couldn't do anything but look at the exterior of the hatch handle housing. And we had to get on the radio and say, Houston, the doorknob doesn't work. And I can imagine the reaction in mission control. I'm sure the flight director turned to Glenda Laws, our instructor, and said, Glenda, your people can't even open a doorknob. How did you teach these people? So they went into Apollo 13 mode overnight. After 2 hours of troubleshooting, they canceled our first spacewalk. Come back inside, we'll think about it and regroup for tomorrow. You get to go outside tomorrow. To make a long story short, they realized the jam was something we could not work on from inside. The mechanism was not accessible. And the risk of bashing our way out through the hatch might mean it wouldn't close on the way back in. So rather than risk losing the Orpheus Spas satellite, tens of millions of dollars invested in that, rather than risk losing that by having to come back home with an emergency return, they said, no more spacewalks. Let's just do the science mission and come home on schedule. So we were skunked. But I know that everybody in mission control and all the experts here at the Cape who looked at the actual flight airlocks here, they put everything they could into figuring out a solution. But they eventually concluded that the only solution was to basically chisel through the hatch to get it open. And that was the kind of damage we did not want to risk inflicting on the mechanism.
Well, obviously a disappointment, but you did get to do a spacewalk.
Yes, there was another chapter after that.
Yeah, did Tammy get the spacewalk after that?
Yes, so I loved the people that I worked with on the space program. And the chief astronaut, Bob Cabana, met us on the runway. We showed the earlier landing picture that you see here. He met us after touchdown and said, Tammy, Tom, I know how disappointed you are. I'm going to try to find you another assignment to an EVA mission as soon as I can.
Ooh.
And he said, maybe even later this year. So I couldn't ask for a better promise. He couldn't get us up in 1997, but within 2 months of coming back, he had us both assigned to space station missions that would involve EVAs. And so both of us got to go outside.
Doesn't surprise me about Bob Cabana. Of course, we dealt with him his 12 years as center director. Just,
right. That's all that you can ask of a boss, is to stand up for his people, and he really supported us.
Let's look at a few pictures from this mission. And this one, I've always wanted to ask one of you astronauts, just what is Story Musgrave snickering about there?
That's just Story's usual impish look.
Is it?
And he's just so experienced. He's seen it all. And so he's just smiling at the camera saying, thanks for sending me. And, to have the privilege of flying 6 times, he tied John Young's record at that point for shuttle flights and space flights. That was really an honor for him. But he already knew that this was going to be his last hurrah. And he wrung every last bit of enjoyment out of this mission together. And I'm glad he got the 18 days up there.
Absolutely. We're amateur astronomers. I attended the Winter Star Party down the Keys many times, and he spent 5 days with us down there one time.
He's just amazing. He's got an appetite for science and enjoying space.
I'm pretty convinced he's the highest IQ human being I've ever stood beside. He's pretty smart.
You're not far off.
Yeah, in there. And he's 88 years old.
Yes, he's 20 years older than me. And when I was in space, confronted with a jammed airlock hatch, and even Story Musgrave couldn't solve the problem for us, Mr. Hubble.
Yeah.
And I said, if he can't figure it out, then I know that I'm not to blame. So, I was reassured that there was nothing that humanly we could do to get that hatch open.
He took come-alongs with him to repair on the Hubble, and they needed to close the doors on there.
Right. When we got out of the airlock and out of our suits, and Story was able to go into the airlock in shirt sleeves, he tried to operate that hatch handle. Of course, the air pressure from inside is pushing it closed. And so it wasn't going to leak or open up accidentally, but he was trying to rotate the handle. And when he couldn't get it to work, I said, thank goodness, they'll believe Story. They might not believe me, but they'll believe Story.
Right. I love this picture of you in a pumpkin suit floating free.
Yes, getting ready to come home.
Oh, that's okay. I was going to say, it's either right after launch.
And I was the flight engineer, the MS2. So here we are getting ready to get seated for entry and running through the deorbit prep checklist. But yes, a nice camera shot from one of the guys in the front seats.
There's the landing there we've got behind there. And then your final mission, STS-98. What an interesting... all of your patches are different, odd shape too, except the one circular one there. One of my favorite patches, because it reminds me of the Grateful Dead "Space Your Face" patch there. I've been a very fan of their music for a while there, but that's that's one of my favorite patches.
Two independent sets of geniuses coming together to make those two designs
Okay.
and converging in evolution. Yes. So the theme here was just, of course, the space station and the delivery of the Destiny Science Lab. That was the Atlantis mission for this flight. And so it's an American lab. We have the Stars and Stripes thing that's very prominent. And we wanted to show the robot arm, which was going to play a key role, the Canadian partner arm. And then we wanted to include the fact that there was the Earth-facing window in the laboratory that would reflect the Earth here in the patch.
I see that, yeah.
And that would open up the world of Earth observation on the space station for the first time. So we were prominently featuring that part of the laboratory there. And that was it.
Tom shows a lot of videos on your talk, and it was fun to see Destiny brand new. You're all doing gymnastics inside of it. And then a couple of years later, you couldn't go through it without bumping into some cables or things like that.
Destiny has been up there for 22 years, and it's just crammed full of productive science experiments and the controls for the station as a whole, some environmental control systems, and it's just the nerve center of the space station even today. You know, there's no cockpit on the space station, but this is pretty close. The Destiny Lab is the operational center for the station.
While we're talking about that, 22 years, it's on the backside of its life. Do you think? What do you think is going to be the future for the space station?
So I'm encouraged that as ISS nears the end of its lifetime, just because of fatigue and system breakdowns, we're going to eventually have to retire it. But as it nears the end of that life cycle, you know, we're moving over to the idea of commercial space stations where NASA can rent space on a privately owned space station, and we'll still get the NASA research needs met by arranging this as a tenant landlord relationship. But then the government can turn away from operating the whole facility and focus on deep space exploration. So that's the right path to go. And I think we're going to see, you know, I think it's called orbital reef.
Yes.
One concept, and then there's the
Axioms.
Right, and there's the
No,
Axiom
Blue,
company.
Blue Origin's the orbital reef.
That's right.
Yeah.
And then you have Axiom, which is going to spin off some modules from the space station. So there'll be several competing facilities, I think, by 2030 up there that will have plenty of tenants as well.
They're clearing the land around the visitors complex like you can't believe for Blue Origin to build their space stations and their lunar modules there.
And the New Glenn rocket.
Yeah, and their New Glenn rocket that's been going on. Well, your last mission there, you know, was another long one. There's your space, your face. See how much they look alike?
They do, yes.
Okay. But I love that you shared this. Mike Leinbach, who launched 37 shuttles. And he ought to know. He said this was the prettiest one that he was involved in.
I'm glad he agrees with me.
Yeah.
And Mike was our launch director, so it was a privilege to have him send us off on that day. But because of the way our space station orbit passed overhead at sundown on February 7th, 2001, we had a launch right at dusk. And so we got this particular atmospheric condition where the sun was going down in the west over the Florida Peninsula and night was coming on in the east. And this was February 7th, the full moon happened to be rising that evening. And so the shadow of our launch exhaust plume was cast from the plume all the way out to the face of the full moon. So that amazing geometry and that celestial artistry came to the fore as they photographed the launch here. And so that's a keeper launch shot. I think it's the best one of all.
You see that picture. Do you see yourself in the cabin just going?
Yeah, we're hanging on by our fingernails.
I mean, is that what you see there when you see that, or do you truly see the beauty of it?
Oh, I see the beauty, but there was no possibility that we would ever notice this.
Yeah, right.
When we were on the ride uphill, you're focusing on engines as you monitor the instruments on the way uphill.
Well, what a great mission! What an important mission! You and Bob Kerbeam there doing an EVA. You got Polanski. And Marcia Ivins, was that her last mission?
Yeah, her last mission.
And there, noted for her beautiful hair in space.
Right.
And the other pilots.
Well, Ken Cockrell was the commander.
Ken Cockrell. There.
And like me, he was on his fourth mission. We're fellow hairballs.
Okay.
And so he went on to fly another mission after that. And this was my last flight. But, you know, I got to do 3 spacewalks with my friend Bob Kerbeam there, also a fellow Baltimorean. And so we really enjoyed the chance to work together and do these 3 EVAs.
You say Kirby's from Baltimore.
So is Marcia.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. That had to be fun.
Think of the tremendous risks that NASA took sending 3 Baltimoreans into space at once.
And Baltimore Orioles there. You were telling me that you and Kirby threw out the opening pitch at a baseball game.
Yeah,
The
right after the
Orioles.
mission, when baseball season opened in 2001, we got invited to Camden Yards. And both of us Orioles fans, we got to throw out the first pitch of the opening day game.
And Tom's been a Baltimore Orioles baseball fan all his life, so boy, is he having fun this year as they're one of the best teams.
Don't jinx us.
I won't. They deserve it. They've had some toughness there. So, but you know, you're delayed of not going out. You still got a little notoriety as this was the 100th EVA
Right.
up there, and
Just by luck. And that's the history of the spacewalks, all coming to STS-98, accomplishing the 100th EVA. So the funny part of this was, you know, I knew about Ed White, first American EVA, and so now we're up to 100 spacewalks on our mission. The funny part was that the 100th EVA was going to be our 3rd trip outside on this mission. And so we're all prepped to give a statement about the importance of spacewalks now and in the future, and respecting the historic past of, you know, Ed White doing the pioneering first spacewalk. And so we're ready to talk to the cameras out in the payload bay. And right before we were going to make our little mini broadcast up there, Mark Polanski holds a paper note up in the window of the cabin. So we come up there in our spacesuits and read the note, and it says, PAO says, Public Affairs says that the 100th spacewalk was really the last one that you did yesterday. And they had done a recount, and they're trying to be accurate.
yeah.
So in their mind, the accurate count was that we did the 100th 2 days earlier. And so we were actually doing the 101st as we were commenting on this. But hey, we just gave our little speech honoring the pioneers of spacewalking and looking forward to the finishing of all the EVAs necessary for the space station's construction.
Well, I don't like that they count the 2 pairs of you as one EVA. When you look at the total EVAs, I'm going, wait a minute, they're each individual EVAs. They're both individual satellites out there, and blah blah blah. But they don't do it that way. They blow them up there.
I guess not.
Statistics are statistics. We're talking with Tom Jones here, one of 604 human beings who have orbited the Earth since the dawn of time, as Hugh Harris used to say, in all eternity, he would say on there. 604. And here's your book that you've written about a handful of them there. What does that number seem to you like after 60 some years of Yuri Gagarin's first flight?
Well, perhaps we haven't come as far in terms of inhabiting space as we might have thought back 60 years ago. You know, certainly you look at a movie that inspired me growing up, 2001: A Space Odyssey, where we had a moon base by 2001 and we were sending spaceships to Jupiter. So we're a little bit slower than that pace. But it's also encouraging that now we're seeing space travelers multiply and mushroom in number very quickly. So we have all the private sector firms now, from suborbital to orbital private journeys to eventual private space stations. And I'm sure we're eventually going to have private visitors to the moon too. So the fact that that industry is growing means that we're going to have a wider base of support and expertise for helping NASA do what it wants to do at the frontiers, at the pioneering edge of space exploration. So when we do the hard stuff, we'll have those entrepreneurs and innovators to help us do that.
And it's happening. It's amazing, just really, what is happening with the entrepreneurs out there, that they're willing to take the risks with their own money.
And what's encouraging is that, you know, this is the U.S., which has the most vibrant commercial space sector on the planet. And there's no other country that's developing ideas and machines as fast as we are able to. So I think that's our competitive edge coming to the fore, and I hope we'll keep that for a long time. And I think with commercial help and participation and interest, we will.
Well, Tom, outside of the Hall of Fame at the Kennedy Space Center Visitors Complex is this quote from astronaut Jim Lovell. The heroic spirit of these astronauts lives on in you. Their stories tell the story of humanity, embracing the legendary in all of us. Jim Lovell, you know, is 93 years old.
God bless him.
And this is outside the Hall of Fame, where Marty knows I love looking at that statue, the Spirit of Space there, Alan Shepard. And there's our Gemini astronauts in the Hall of Fame. And you just look underneath Alan Shepard's helmet there, are some acrylic images back there. And by golly, one of those is Tom Jones in the Hall of Fame.
Pinch me, I'm dreaming. Yeah, it's
What
really,
does that mean
it's
to
extraordinary.
you, sir?
Well, I could never have dreamed as a 10-year-old looking at a Titan II that I'd one day be honored to be in the Hall of Fame with people like Shepard and Lovell. And I think it's just a great testament to the spirit of exploration in our country, and the fact that a kid from Essex, Maryland can grow up with no special connection to NASA, be inspired by the moon landings, and then learn enough and work hard enough to get an opportunity to join the astronaut corps. What a great country where we have that opportunity to just grow up and try something that nobody would give you a chance of achieving. But it's up to you. With persistence and determination, you can train yourself up to that level and seize that opportunity.
Well, you're a 28 inductee there, and you're in great company there. Look at the my Mercury heroes back there, our Mercury heroes.
Right,
and
mine too.
And Scooter, Scott Altman, I think, was inducted with you.
That's
You're
right.
You're on a wall there with Cavandy and Mike Foll and Ellen Ochoa, and I think that's Buckley. They're up there. Just a beautiful, beautiful building. If you've not been in there, very awe-inspiring. Have you been in there to see yourself in there?
Not on this visit yet, but I'm certain I'll get over there. And I've really
There's a,
enjoyed going through the
There's a nice
galleries.
kiosk there, and you can put in there. For those of you who don't know, you put you're the only J in there, by the way, so far.
Huh.
The only one with the letter J.
I hadn't realized
There's
that.
about 4 Ks in there below you, but it's laid out like this, Tom, and then you pick a pretty picture of you, and there you're having chow in one of the galleys there. You know, which I don't recognize the shirt. I'm sure you do. Is that 80?
I would say it's probably either 59 or 80. I can't tell from this distance.
Well, I
But
mean,
the-
congratulations to you there. Really, I love going to there just to. It's kind of spiritual for me. I look at all these guys that I've idolized in a positive way of that they're not that I could be them, but acknowledging what they're doing up there. So
And being in the space program gives me a chance to meet you and your team here at the museum and some of my space heroes. It's been
That's
a real
right.
privilege.
well, good. They're good. So that's your missions there. We've had a great conversation here. I wanted to hit a little bit about your book, Planetology. We're just going to kind of go through this because we've had a nice long conversation. But we promote Asteroid Day, June 30th, and awareness that it's not if, but when something's going to hit the Earth like hit the dinosaurs 65 million years ago. You're very involved with that. Tell us about that.
Well, I'm an asteroid scientist by training, and of course, I appreciate the planetary defense challenge in front of us as human beings. So we are going to be struck by another dangerous asteroid in the future if we do nothing about it. But we are living in the 21st century where we have the space skills to apply to nudging a rogue asteroid out of a collision course with Earth. And this is a very important application of space skills and technology. I think when we look back 100 years from the start of the space age, we'll say that one of the major benefits, if not the best benefit, is the fact that we've saved Earth from a planetary collision from a rogue asteroid, and will have saved human civilization as a result, thanks to our ability to go into and work in space. So it's a big challenge. We're not there yet, but we're developing slowly the skills to find rogue asteroids and then the means to technically nudge them off a collision course. And got a lot of work ahead of us, but I'm encouraged that we've come a long way in the last 20 years.
And Asteroid Day is an awareness of that. Actually, one of the founders is rock star Brian May of the group Queen. You
Right.
said that you're over the chapter in Washington, D.C. or involved with that.
Well, so I'm in the Association of Space Explorers, our professional astronaut society, and we have a mission as part of our organization to help protect the Earth and its environment. And of course, planetary defense would be a big part of that. So I am the chairman of the Near Earth Objects Committee for the ASE. And we have international astronaut participation all around the globe in promoting Asteroid Day on June 30th, the Tunguska impact in 1908's anniversary.
Right.
And that's a good way to involve the public in appreciating the importance of preparedness and urging their governments to invest more in planetary defense.
So Tom is still looking up, and why? Because this is off my favorite homepage website, Space Weather. At this very moment, there are 2,349 potentially hazardous asteroids within the vicinity of Earth, and as you see, the mist distance, LD, that's lunar diameters, that's 250,000 miles, say 250,000 miles. So, and this is a long list that's published every day.
Mhm.
And then yesterday, they always push a list of what are these things? These are 17 fireballs, pieces of cosmic debris, probably the size of a stone, maybe a walnut at the biggest, that are blowing up, not just a regular meteor streak, but they actually kind of blow up at the end of it, fireballs there.
Yeah.
Those were just last night.
And those are the orbits deduced from their entry trajectories.
So that they're come from all over
Mhm.
the planes of the solar system.
100 tons of stuff is falling on us every day.
Yes.
And sometimes it's just dust, and we worry about a big chunk coming through the atmosphere and causing damage. So it only takes something about the size of 40 meters across to penetrate the atmosphere and destroy a city if it landed at the wrong place. So we've got to keep searching for these objects.
It almost did up in Russia. Chelyabinsk was a close call.
That's right.
A grazed one there, but we're not going to get too much detail there. You know, I could get sidetracked with this gentleman talking astronomy. But Planetology, check that book out. It's heavily, a lot of great pictures in there that you've chosen with Ellen Stofan there, who you said was you worked with on the.
Yeah, she's a volcanologist, a planetary volcanism expert. And as I said, now she's up in the upper reaches of the Smithsonian. But she and I worked together on Earth science and volcanology during the Space Radar Lab flights.
Not too bad having National Geographic and Smithsonian as your publishers there. That's
It's nice to team up with some people who
It
really
is.
can put out a good product.
absolutely, and they look beautiful. Going to kind of skip through some of this. I didn't know how in depth we go, but there's our terrestrial planets, and what we speak about as a planetary geologist is 3 billion years ago with a B. Okay, the right side is now. So yes, Mars over 2.5 billion years ago. You know, we've got something going on here.
Mm.
And your education, what's happened to the solar system to have these dramatic changes where
Mars just didn't grow into a large enough body thanks to Jupiter and the next orbit out. So it didn't grow as big as the Earth. And without the size, it lost its heat more rapidly and lost its internal circulation in the molten core, and it can't generate a magnetic field. So the Mars magnetic field disappeared, which allowed the solar wind to strip off the upper atmosphere of Mars. So it lost most of its water, and now it's got that very thin, tenuous atmosphere today that makes it a frigid place. So it's just in a bad place, an unlucky place in the solar system that it happened to evolve.
well, where there's water, there's life here on
Still
Earth.
might be a chance of life there.
And this is a graphic that I pulled up, Tom, to show over 13 bodies in the solar system have ice, liquid water beneath that ice. Okay. Moons of Jupiter up at the top, Europa, Ganymede, Callisto, Titan orbiting Saturn, Eris, Pluto, and Sedna are dwarf planets. And then you got some moons of Uranus and Neptune in there. I think the solar system's teeming with life. I mean, it doesn't have to be. I think they're sea monkey life or that
Right.
type of thing.
Fairly primitive.
Bacteria.
Right. I mean, we might have environments in these sub-ice oceans where the conditions were right for life to evolve, and we're going to find out first by going to Mars, but then eventually with robots going through these icy crusts of these outer moons, we might find environments where we have primitive life evolving independently on a number of worlds. And if we find that kind of an answer, even one in one place, then we know that life is not unique to Earth and that Milky Way is teeming with life. So it's a very important fundamental scientific discovery that we're going after by going to Mars, for example.
Enceladus is a moon that has geysers spewing out of it that Voyager saw orbiting Saturn. That's a big target there. But of course, the buzz is going to the moon, the south pole of the moon, and here is the north and south pole. The blue shows you where there is frozen water. And what do you think of the India's success with their Chandrayaan-3 rover
Right.
and so
I
forth?
guess only the fourth nation to successfully land on the moon. And so the Indian technical achievement is very good. They did it on a low budget. And so you can see that by applying some smarts and some good design and innovative design, they got their spacecraft down to the South Pole, first nation to get to the South Pole of the moon. And I think that they'll be very active participants in the search for that water resource up there. Maybe they'll become very active partners with the Artemis team to exploit water and make rocket fuel and the life support fluids we'll need for a lunar outpost.
This is the South Pole area. You see Shackleton there in the middle is thought of as there. But China also wants to go to the South Pole, and under the guise of the International Lunar Laboratory that they've created. But they, in 2028, they want to send a spacecraft to the South Pole to harvest the regolith and water in the form of ice and make Lego bricks in 2028.
Probably with additive manufacturing, 3D printing,
Yeah.
and use the materials up there to demonstrate how you might construct a habitat with native materials.
And,
And I think the Chinese are very capable, and they're going to at first imitate what we did with Apollo. But if we're not able to challenge their technical mastery of the moon, then it's very clear that they're going to become the leading technical power of the 21st century. And I don't think that's good for our economy or for our national security.
Let's hope we get some kids graduating from colleges that can counter this. Where'd all this water come from? The Oort cloud. And the Oort cloud is still kind of a mysterious thing. Suggested in the 1950s by Dutch astronomer Jan Oort, is basically a cocoon of comets that our solar system's enveloped in. Did you do much research on that?
No, I didn't look that far out. My focus in my asteroid studies was the main asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter. But I know friends who have made their careers looking for trans-Neptunian and Plutonian objects, these icy worlds that are out there beyond the reaches of the known planets. And there might be remnants out there of worlds that we haven't been able to detect yet that are subtly gravitationally influencing the outer planet's orbit. So we don't know everything about the solar system's population yet, and the Oort cloud is certainly worth exploring.
And comets coming into our solar system pulled in may take 10,000 years to come from the Oort cloud to pass by Earth, but one's doing so right now. It's called Nishimura. This is a photograph taken with a professional telescope. You can see it with a camera. You can't see it with the eye too good, but it is about an hour before sunrise. This is in West Germany by an astrophotographer there. You see
Wonderful.
The right in there, gorgeous in there. So you only got about till the 17th of the month, and then it's going to go loop around the sun and come up. But we're always hearing about comets and on Comet Alert. Because we had, 1986 Hale-Bopp in 97 has been really the last real good one. We had Comet Knot a couple years ago, but I just wanted to kind of, I guess I got too far out there for you, Tom.
No, I mean, like the asteroids, these are the leftovers of the formation of the solar system, and they contain, in some cases, interstellar material from before the birth of the sun. So they're wonderful research targets.
Well, I've certainly enjoyed talking with Tom Jones here. There are your books again that we want y'all to buy. Tom, is there somebody that you thought that you would never get to meet that you did because of your astronaut career?
Neil Armstrong, of
Okay.
course.
All right.
So it was just
Where'd you meet Neil?
well, he would occasionally come to Houston to brief the new astronaut classes, and we get a chance to hear his test piloting stories. And
Really, would he?
he would never talk about Apollo 11. He would just talk about flying the X-15 or the aerodynamics of hypersonic flight, things that interested him as an aerospace professor.
Uh-huh.
And so he was very much in professor mode when he would come and visit, but he would answer questions about the first lunar landing mission. So, and then I got to work with him on the NASA Advisory Council in the mid to late 2000s, where Neil was heading up one of the aerospace committees on that panel. And so, we got to meet fairly frequently and get to know him a little bit. So that was a real privilege.
Yeah, he's a Buckeye like me, so that's a good thing there.
Wonderful guy.
And he
Wonderful guy.
taught at the University of Cincinnati, and
Mhm.
he made it plain. I've heard that we're not talking about me being an astronaut or moonwalker. If you come up for an autograph, you get an F. Does everybody understand me? We're here to learn engineering in there. So, anybody else? I was kidding you about Tom Jones, the singer. Did you ever meet him? Did he ever want to meet you? Or
Haven't crossed paths.
okay,
But there's still time.
still
right?
time.
Yes.
Yeah, still time in
And
there.
when I was a cadet at the academy, I ran into Werner von Braun.
Uh-huh.
And so I know many people in the space program had the privilege of working with him and meeting him. But as a young student, I got to talk to him after his lecture and say, what do I have to do to become an astronaut? And so he'd heard that question 10,000 times, but he was nice enough to give me a coherent and patient answer. So that was one of the things that helped inspire me to continue on and try to pursue this career field.
Interesting. We talked this week about Werner von Braun in 1968 donning a spacesuit and going into the buoyancy tank in Huntsville,
No
not
doubt.
Marshall,
Yeah.
to test out the seals on the helmet.
Hmm.
He would do things like that. I mean, that
Right.
really impresses me.
Brilliant guy, no question.
In
And
there, so
I think he's one of the key figures in the success of the American space program.
oh, absolutely. And of course, we grew up. I did. I remember seeing him on Walt Disney and talking about
Right.
the space program and going to space and Mars. We'd have colonies on Mars right now if Werner von Braun had his way, maybe. So
And I think he, in many ways, his long service to NASA and the country here, redeemed the fact that he worked for the wrong side in World War II. And so he had his internal demons and responsibilities that he had to confront, but I think he redeemed himself in large part by, the contributions he made to our success in Apollo and the other programs.
in talking with Tom Jones, you are a World War II historian and aviation historian. You really
I read a lot about it.
enjoy reading a lot about that.
Sure.
And I think that's fascinating in itself. So, Tom Jones, continued success to you in your writing there. Let's look at your book here going out. Space, it's just brand new.
Thanks
Doesn't
so
even
much.
have any thumbprints on it. Can we
Oh.
open up a page there to
Right.
show?
So there were 135 shuttle missions, and so in this book you find a 2-page spread for every mission. There's an astronaut story and some spectacular photos that go with each one. So
Oh boy.
it's about 300 pages, and there's some nice framing text that I wrote that tells you the story of the development and testing of the shuttle, and then how we dealt with the accidents and how the shuttle was a successful science platform and then space station builder.
And we love celebrating that on Stay Curious, as our regular watchers know that. Tom, is there anything I didn't ask you or that you'd like to share with our audience today?
Thank you very much for the opportunity to talk space history and space memories, and I wish you and the museum team here a great success.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you very much, sir. We look forward to seeing you many times out at the Space Center. Marty, thank you for a great job today. Do you have anything you wanted to ask Tom?
No, I'm good. Thanks.
You're good? Okay. Well, you'll be buying this book and he'll be autographing it next time you see him at the Space Center. I know that.
You
so.
bet.
Already have it back ordered.
All right. Well, we appreciate everybody supporting our humble nonprofit that for over 20 years has been preserving the birth of the American space program right here in this delivery room, Brevard County. And we can't thank Dr. Tom Jones enough for taking time to share his story with you here on Stay Curious. So thank you all for watching. Thank you, sir, for a great program. We enjoyed your company. And until the next time, I'm Marquette saying I can't wait to see you again to bridge the space between us.